Hi, kindergarten. Today we're going to learn about evergreen trees. And I love evergreen trees because if you ask me, they smell so good. They smell just like pine sap and it's the best. There were a lot of pine trees where I grew up. And I'm going to teach you about evergreen trees today. So these right here are cones. Cones are the part of some evergreen trees that contain the seeds. So if you've ever seen a pine cone, that's where an evergreen tree keeps its seeds. Conifers are evergreen trees that have needle-like leaves and make cones. So this is the conifer tree, and here are the needles and the cones. Then we have evergreen, and evergreen just means having green leaves all year round, so they're green even in the winter. And needles are the very thin little leaves that come out of them. And those are also the needles. It's kind of cool. So, you already learned about deciduous trees. Now remember, deciduous trees are the ones over here, and they lose their leaves in the fall. Evergreen trees are the other kinds of trees. They're these ones over here, and they are the ones that stay green in the winter. So remember, deciduous trees lose their leaves. Evergreen do not. When do deciduous trees begin to grow new leaves? In the spring. Exactly. So the main topic or main idea of today's lesson is evergreen trees. Listen carefully to learn about evergreen trees and to find out how they're different from deciduous trees. The trees in this picture are all evergreen trees. Evergreen trees are similar and different to the deciduous trees you learned about earlier. We use the word evergreen to describe plants that have leaves and stay green year-round. So summer, spring, winter, fall, all green. Evergreens come in a variety of shapes and sizes, but they all have at least one obvious thing in common. They are always green. Evergreen. So forever, they're green. Are there any evergreen trees like these near your home? There aren't very many evergreen trees in DC, but you can find them some places. One type of evergreen tree is called a pine tree. Pine trees have a pleasant smell, which many people like to have in their homes during winter months. So some people might get Christmas trees, some other people might not. The leaves of most evergreen trees are called needles, so they're really thin and pointy. This picture shows the needle of a pine tree. Evergreen trees, like deciduous trees, make food through photosynthesis, which occurs in these tiny needle leaves. Do you remember what photosynthesis is? Photosynthesis is how plants use light to turn water and air into food. Photosynthesis slows down during the winter in evergreen trees, but it does not stop altogether as it does in deciduous trees. Because the needles of an evergreen tree are much smaller than the leaves of a deciduous tree, it's easier for the evergreen tree to make enough food to keep most of its leaves alive and on the tree all year long, because they're so teeny. Wherever you find evergreen trees, you are also likely to find these things scattered around on the ground. If you look up while standing under an evergreen tree, you might see some of these growing on the tree's branches. They are called cones. Remember, cones are the part of some evergreen trees that contain seeds. Most evergreen trees are called conifers, which is another word for trees that have needle-like leaves and make cones. The cones in this picture are called pine cones. Unlike deciduous trees, which have flowers and fruit, conifer trees do not have flowers and they do not grow fruit. Instead, conifer trees make cones and seeds grow inside their cones. When a cone opens on the ground, the seeds fall out and are spread by the wind. Remember, the seeds are important because that's what makes other trees grow. If a seed falls into the soil and has the right amount of food, water, air, and light, it might grow into a seedling and then a sapling, like a baby tree. The first plants you will notice in this picture are ferns, which are not evergreens or trees. Ferns are short plants that grow in the woods. But if you have sharp eyes, though, you can see another type of plant in this picture. There's a little pine sapling, a baby tree pushing its way through the ferns. Do you see it? If the sapling is tough, as many pine trees are, it will continue growing until it stands high above the ferns. It may grow big enough to produce its own pine cones one day. Remember that the seeds to make new pine trees are inside the cones. Did you know that a tree adds a new layer of wood every year? So this new layer forms what is called a growth ring. When you cut down a tree, you can see the growth rings. You can tell exactly how old a tree is by counting its rings. How old do you think this tree is? That would be really hard to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Ooh! I couldn't even count all of those. But this tree is little more than 50 years old, which is actually pretty young for a tree. If it hadn't been cut down, this tree might have lived to have 100 or more growth rings. So every ring is a year that it was alive. Did you know that you could tell how old a tree is by how many rings there are? That is cool. Remember, evergreen trees and deciduous trees are the two main types of trees found in the world. Next time you see a tree, try to figure out whether it's an evergreen or a deciduous tree. The leaves might give you your first clue. Because remember, over here we have evergreen, over here we have deciduous. Pretty cool. Great job, kindergarten. And yes, you can click on that exit ticket below.